Hey everyone, it's Alex the Real Mr. Robinson. So normally this would be a video where I do a spoiler review for Kong Skull Island. But to be totally honest, outside of the end credit scene, there's not a whole lot to talk about with this movie. There are really no big surprises that happen throughout this movie, but if you want me to talk about some of the stuff, I'll just go over it really briefly. John C. Reilly's character is a World War II veteran who crash landed on Skull Island and has been living there for the past 30 years. John Goodman's character dies, Samuel L. Jackson's character dies, Toby Kebbell's character dies, and the way that Kong kills the main skull crawler is by ripping its stomach out through its mouth, which is... holy shit, is it disgusting. And this isn't one of those things where it cuts away and you get the impression. No, you see Kong rip the stomach through the skull crawler's mouth and it dies. It's just like in Godzilla when Godzilla kills the main Muto by breathing his atomic breath down her throat, and her neck pretty much evaporates and crumbles, detaching her head from her body. It's pretty cool, and I kind of find it funny that both movies, the monster villain dies in a way that makes you go, whoa, holy shit. So that's amusing, but the main thing I wanted to talk about with this video is the end credit scene and the future of Legendary's MonsterVerse, as it's being called. This is the cinematic universe that involves this interpretation of both King Kong and Godzilla. So the end credit scene takes place on the ship that our main characters get back to once they leave Skull Island. It's focused on Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson as two members from Monarch, John Goodman's assistant, and the Chinese girl who had no purpose in the movie, come in and say, welcome to Monarch, and something along the lines of, Kong is not the only god out there in the world. And then they show the two a slideshow of cave paintings that feature Godzilla, who we've already seen before, and then Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, three of Toho's most popular Godzilla monsters. And they also show a cave painting of Godzilla fighting King Ghidorah. And then, as it cuts to black, we hear Godzilla's roar, which, when I saw Kong Skull Island, that roar shook the theater. Godzilla's roar is still incredibly powerful. But back to the end credit scene. Before this movie came out, I didn't know what the end credit scene would be. All I knew is that it would involve those four monsters. Because I heard that during the credits, there was the little line, Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah, property of Toho Company Limited. So I figured, okay, so these four monsters are going to be represented in this movie in some capacity. They're not going to be in the movie physically, but unless it's an end credit scene, which, holy shit, we might be able to see the monsters in the end credit scene. And then, once the end credit scene came up, I was kind of underwhelmed. And that honestly has to do with my expectations. Because I was playing a bunch of scenarios in my mind when thinking of what the end credit scene could be. Like, we see the first appearance of Mothra, like an egg hatching on Skull Island, and it shows a moth, Rodan living on Skull Island, or King Ghidorah coming out from space after bursting from a fireball like in the original movies. My mind started wandering, so I was a little disappointed when it was just cave paintings of these monsters. However, I guess it was probably one of the best ways possible to show off these monsters, since I bet they're still in the design phase of how to reinvent Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah for this series. Although what the cave paintings did show makes me happy that they're not radically redesigning the monsters like with Roland Emmerich's Godzilla. I know that movie's almost 20 years old, but it was really, hurtful to see that they just completely redesigned Godzilla and make him look nothing like it. With Legendary, it's good to know that they are on the right track and they know what they're doing when it comes to these monsters. So that's pretty much all I have to say about the end credit scene. Just a little tease for the upcoming Godzilla 2, or Godzilla King of the Monsters, which I really wish they would have called it something else, because now when you have people talking about these two American movies, you're going to have conversations like, oh, have you seen Godzilla? Wait, which one? The 1954 one, the 1998 one, or the 2014 one? And now you're going to have people say, oh, have you seen Godzilla King of the Monsters? Wait, are you talking about the American version of the original, or the sequel to the American version? See, that's confusing enough, so I just wish they would have called it something else rather than Godzilla King of the Monsters. But I am grateful that the rematch between King Kong and Godzilla is titled Godzilla vs. Kong and not King Kong vs. Godzilla, at least for now. So we know Godzilla King of the Monsters is going to have Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah, and then we know the movie after that will pit Godzilla and King Kong against each other, which brings up a question that I have and a concern. I'm going to start off with the concern. One of my big complaints in my review for Kong Skull Island was that the tone was just rather all over the place. Some points I wanted to be really funny and upbeat, and some points I wanted to be really tension-filled and thrilling and kind of horrific. And I just didn't think it really meshed all that well. And with Godzilla, it had a very consistent tone. Whether you liked the movie or not, it had the same tone. Whenever there were some funny moments, they never felt out of place. They didn't feel inorganic. And while the funny moments in Kong Skull Island worked most of the time, there were points where the humor felt really inorganic. So I'm really curious to see what they're going to do with these two tones in Godzilla vs. Kong, because you don't want these two tones to mesh uncomfortably. Maybe they'll use Godzilla King of the Monsters to really finalize the tone for Godzilla before Godzilla vs. Kong. I'm sure that's what they're going to do. So I'll reserve judgment until Godzilla King of the Monsters comes out. And now the question that I have is, what comes after Godzilla vs. Kong? Because unlike with Marvel or DC, Legendary has not mapped out their entire line. They really don't have anything planned after Godzilla vs. Kong, which I'm kind of grateful for, because it makes all of us fans wonder what's going to happen next. So the big questions that I have are, could Legendary get the rights to some more monsters from Toho? And if they do, what monsters could we see in the future? Could we see Anguirus, Baragon, Varan, Gorosaurus, Biollante? Those are monsters that I feel like are plausible to have in this MonsterVerse, because they are a little more realistic and down to earth. Biollante is the more fantastical of all the monsters that I listed, but I feel like if they rework her, it could be effective within this grounded universe that Legendary has set up. At least as grounded as you can be with a giant ape and a giant atomic dinosaur. I know some monsters that people would like to see would probably be Mechagodzilla or Gigan, but to be honest, those two monsters seem way too far-fetched for this kind of series. I mean, I love Mechagodzilla and Gigan just as much as the next Godzilla fan. However, I'm also wanting to try to think logically within the rules that this universe has set. Let's take the monsters that are confirmed for Godzilla King of the Monsters. Rodan is very simple to do. His background's very similar to Godzilla, a pteranodon who's made bigger than normal thanks to nuclear radiation. Mothra can be a little more difficult because Mothra is more of a fantasy type monster, especially when you bring in the two Mothra twins, which I doubt are going to make an appearance in Godzilla King of the Monsters. But with Mothra in Toho's history, they've reworked her several points. They have different interpretations of the fairies, or removed them altogether, like in Destroy All Monsters and Giant Monsters All Out Attack. Where in the latter movie, there was a little reference to the twin fairies that was kind of in your face, but they were not in that movie at all. And then lastly, let's talk about King Ghidorah. King Ghidorah in the original Godzilla series is a monster from outer space who was born from a meteor, spawned from a fireball that came out from the meteor. That's the King Ghidorah that everyone remembers, but again, throughout Toho's history, he's been changed up a bit here and there. In the 90s, he was the creation of people from the future. In the Mothra trilogy, he was the space monster responsible for the extinction of the dinosaurs. And then in the Millennium series, he was turned into the Guardian of the Skies to defend Japan from Godzilla. The only time when King Ghidorah is actually represented as a good guy. So is there a chance that Ghidorah could be portrayed as a space monster in the MonsterVerse? I highly doubt it, but the reason I listed off all the various changes that Toho made to both Mothra and Ghidorah in the movies that they've been in is to not only show how those monsters could possibly work in Godzilla King of the Monsters, but also why I selected those specific monsters that I listed before, like Anguirus, Baragon, Varan, Gorosaurus, Biollante, even Titanosaurus, but something like Orga, Space Godzilla, Gigan, Mechagodzilla, forget about it. I highly doubt that those monsters will ever make an appearance in the MonsterVerse if Legendary were to get some more rights from Toho. So that's ultimately what I have to say about the end credit scene and what my thoughts and wonders are for the future of the MonsterVerse. I could not be more excited for where this is going. I really did enjoy both Godzilla and Kong Skull Island. I'm really looking forward to Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong. And I probably have said this in a previous video at one time, but I feel so lucky to be living at a time where there's this sudden resurgence of popularity with Godzilla. We have a series of American Godzilla movies, we have a new series of Japanese Godzilla movies, and there's a Godzilla anime that's supposed to debut on Netflix later this year. So, holy crap. Along with this and the resurgence of Star Wars, I feel like a kid again. I felt like I got transported 10 years in the past, and it's an awesome time to be alive, I gotta say, yeah? Even with all the political bullshit, it's an awesome time to be alive. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about the MonsterVerse and what I think would happen in the future. I want to know what you guys think of it. Let me know what you thought of the little spoilers in Kong Skull Island, the end credit scene, and what you think the future could be for this series after Godzilla vs. Kong. What monsters would you like to see put into this MonsterVerse? And also, if you do believe that some of the monsters that I listed that couldn't fit in this universe could fit in the universe, like Gigan and Mechagodzilla, let me know. I'd like to hear your thoughts or your theories on what they could do, and we could probably engage in a debate. So let me know in the comments below, and as always, like, subscribe, share me with your friends. This is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.